Compared to many countries around the world, Britain has never been known for snowstorms. In March 1888, there had been a fierce blizzard in America which battered the east coast, bringing down telegraph lines between New York and Boston. The only way for the two cities to communicate was via London, by way of the Atlantic underwater cables. So messages meant for people 300 miles away had to be rerouted a total of 7,000 miles across the ocean and back again. The London Telegraph Office staff may have thought that their own country would be unlikely to face such a disruptive weather event, but they were wrong. I'm your host Prash, and this is Curious Britain. Back in the 1800s, snow and ice was more common in the UK than it is today. In 1838, temperatures dropped to minus 25 degrees Celsius, the coldest temperature recorded in England in the 19th century, and roads were completely blocked by snow that was several feet deep. In more modern times, people often refer to the winter of 1947 when snowdrifts reached a height of nearly 7 feet. But few snowfalls were more devastating than the one which took place in March of 1891, although for some reason popular news websites seem to leave this incident languishing in the archives as a forgotten piece of history, and it's rarely mentioned today, perhaps overlooked because the worst of it hit the southwest rather than the capital. It started on Monday 9th of March 1891, at the beginning of what was to become a terrible week for farmers, travellers and sailors. When the snow flurries began, they clothed the roads and trees in thick white coats more rapidly than anyone could have anticipated. Those who were tucked up warmly in front of their hearth fires at home might have glanced away from the scene outside the window for a matter of minutes, only to look back and find that every last bit of green had already been carpeted in the soft white powder. And it didn't stop. Before long, roads were impassable, and there were reports of snowdrifts up to 15 feet high. Somerset, Devon and Cornwall were the worst affected. Trees were blown down in the icy winds, and the River Exe burst its banks. Several ships ran aground on the rocky Cornish coast, buffeted by the violent gales. That Monday night, the Western Belle of Exeter ran ashore near Bognor. The coast guardsmen braved the bitter chill and sailed out in a lifeboat to rescue those on board, well stocked with blankets and brandy. All the crew were rescued, but on the way back to shore, the lifeboat struck a groin and shattered into pieces, throwing all the passengers into the glacial sea. Miraculously, all survived and made it back to dry land. Elsewhere in the area, telegraph poles and lines came crashing down, cutting off communications. The following day, on Tuesday 10th of March, a southwestern mail train trying to reach London was derailed by the fearsome winds and swirling snow, killing 2 passengers. It was a storm that made everything worse. Coming almost as if from nowhere, the east-northeasterly wind increased in strength over the course of the day, whipping up the snow and creating immense drifts. Several trains were buried under these enormous snowbanks, trapping people inside for days, who survived thanks to the help of local farmers who selflessly exposed themselves to the elements to bring food and drink for the stranded travellers. But the southeast was not immune to the dramatic weather either. The steamship Victoria was taking 21 passengers across the channel from Dover and left dock shortly before 6 p.m. Within minutes, The vessel was surrounded by a snowstorm which reduced visibility to almost zero, and the winds were so strong that water was being lifted out of the sea and blown onto the deck of the ship. Thankfully, they made it to Calais without disaster, but the captain and crew said later that it had been the worst night of their lives. A crew that had been shipwrecked at Dungeness was not so lucky, with 10 lives lost, including 3 coastguards who had gone to their aid in a lifeboat. Another ship was wrecked on the rocks at Lizard Point, and many of the crew were washed overboard and drowned, while others clung desperately to the rigging where they froze to death from exposure to the icy water. 23 people died in this incident alone. Around the country, roofs collapsed under the weight of snow, and thousands of sheep and cattle died in the Arctic conditions. Up on the moors and hilly areas, conditions were even worse. Unable to leave their homes and travel to buy supplies, people ran out of food and coal or wood for their fires. The weather was more extreme than the country had ever seen, and some workers froze to death on duty as they tried valiantly to restore the railways and roads. By the end of the week, on Saturday 14th of March, the wind had eased off and there were signs that the thaw had finally begun. Over the previous 7 days, more than 200 people and 6,000 animals had died due to the blizzard. But it would take a long time for the country to return to normal, as it wasn't until June that the very last of the snow faded from parts of Dartmoor. And for those who lived through it, it would take far longer for the memories of their winter ordeal to melt away. You've been listening to Curious Britain. This show is run by a husband and wife team, me, Prash, and my wife Melissa, and between the two of us, we do all the research, writing, narration and audio production. We believe there's so much to enjoy about the ancient isles we live on. Britain is shrouded in myth, legend, history and mystery, and we spend our spare time learning about the enthralling and little-known stories of the nation's heritage so we can bring them to you. Join us again next time as we continue to explore interesting, enchanting and surprising things about England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland in this celebration of everything that's curious about Britain.